Hello, everyone. Welcome to Showing Up in the Age of AI Search. My name is Janet Driscoll Miller. I'm the president and CEO of Marketing Mojo, and I will be your moderator for today. We've got an exciting discussion to get to. Joining me on the panel today are Nikki Lamb, Senior VP and Head of Earned at NP Digital.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
We have Gerald Murphy, Evangelist for Semrush Enterprise at Semrush.
Hi everyone, really looking forward to today's conversation.
Sara Resnick, Global Lead of Marketing and SEO for Western Union.
Hi there. Nice to be here.
And Tamara Scott, Chief Content Officer at Overqualified LLC.
Hey everyone, happy to be here.
As a reminder, if you have any questions or comments during our session today, please drop them in the chat and we'll do our best to address them during the Q&A later in this session. So to kick things off, I'd like to ask each of the panelists, with the rise of AI overviews and LLMs, websites are getting less traffic today than they have been and click-through rates are down. What should brands think about when it comes to visibility in this new age of brand discovery? And I'd like to kick that off first to Sara.
Yeah, I think brands have some opportunity here to kind of own their brand narrative in a big way. The brands have a good opportunity to take back brand ownership in a lot of ways where if you do a search, for example, of your brand plus your terms, so whether it be brand plus customer service, Western Union customer service, Western Union help, and every other term. So kind of doing a brand search with your Google Search Console and other terms and just making sure that you're controlling that narrative. Take a look at those different types of brand searches and try to own each one because often in AI overviews, you might not be owning every single one. And you really want to make sure that you are controlling that narrative in a big way. So I think it's not just an SEO thing too. It's a lot of different departments that would help you own that narrative. So just making sure that your different pages are speaking to that specific area of opportunity there and interlinking and all of the best practices that are true to SEO as it's always been.
Thanks, Sara. I also think that Gerald might have a few things he wants to add to this.
Absolutely, and couldn't agree more with you, Sarah. I think there's two big things happening right now at the same time. Clicks are declining, but also paid search is costing more, particularly for branded keywords. So the traditional idea of visibility, i.e. ranking on Google and getting clicks as a result, is becoming less reliable as the only success metric. And the shift is basically that visibility is no longer just about Google. And consumers now discover brands across AI systems, marketplaces like Amazon, social platforms like TikTok, communities like Reddit, and video platforms like YouTube. So visibility is now shifting from links to influence. And actually, when you look at the SEO space over the last 20 years or so, it's been primarily measured by clicks, but AI is introducing something really new, which is the decision stage exposure. And that's what we're really looking forward to getting into in today's conversation.
I love that. And Gerald kind of took part of my answer. We at NP Digital, we've been embracing an approach that we call search everywhere optimization for a while now, because while Google AI overviews and all these new AI models like ChatGPT are the shiny new object, we know that search has been fracturing for a long time, right? Click-through rates have been on the decline, not just since the introduction of Google AI overviews. And so our search everywhere approach at NP Digital encompasses all of the surfaces that Gerald brought up, right? It might be TikTok or Reddit forums, LinkedIn. So we're really taking a search everywhere approach to assessing gaps that our clients have, because today it's not enough just to say you're not visible for this keyword on Google. You have to say, hey, you're not visible in these really key conversations that are taking place across all of these other surfaces as well.
And I think to go back to the brand narrative too, to tell your brand story and to use all of those areas that Gerald mentioned of video and like all of those different mediums of more than just your traditional website area is just so important to go beyond just your normal site, traditional your social media, and how do you get that onto your website and using that multimedia approach. So kind of coming full circle.
And actually, just to jump into that, Sarah, too, I think full circle is definitely a key phrase that resonates with me, particularly when you look at some of the clickstream data that we at Semrush have. So, for instance, what we have basically found when we analysed 80 million clickstream records, we basically found that when users visit an AI source, for instance, ChatGPT, before they visit a brand's website, they're actually 4.4 times more valuable as a consumer. And we're surmising things like they've done their research, they understand their problem a bit better, they understand the products that solve that problem or need, and therefore when they then find the brand that has those products, they're more likely to convert. So actually it's really flipped the narrative around what does intent actually mean as an actual, not just a keyword, but actually as a whole action.
Great. Well, thank you all for that perspective. So now we're going to jump into a poll question. So I'd like to ask all of you in the audience to take a poll. Let's launch the poll first. Do I need to launch the poll? Shoot. There it goes. And you're going to be asked to participate. Please enter your first name and join and click on the join audience button first. That's the step we need to take first to take the poll. Then click on the polls icon in the top right corner of the video window. You will see a poll come up, and you'll be able to select one option. There are 4 options there. And the question that we're asking today is, what is the biggest challenge in SEO right now? Is it like lack of citations? Brand control, we talked just a lot about brand in that first question. Site traffic is down, or all of the above. So what is your perspective? What are you seeing in your own company? We'll give you a few seconds to respond. And again, if you go to the, you want to enter your name first to join the poll, and then click on the join audience button to actually enter your information. We'll just give you a couple seconds there, and then we'll close the poll and look at our results. Okay, there's our results. Interesting. So site traffic seems to be a big one, but everybody's seeing a lot of these different issues with SEO right now. Many of the things that we just talked about in our first question. So with that, brand being a very important part of that, and we talked about that in our first question. For a brand just starting out with GEO, what is the single most impactful change that we think that they can use in their content today to ensure AI systems and agents can successfully parse, trust, and synthesize correctly that information for their brand? So I'm going to throw that to Tamara first. Tamara, what are your thoughts as a content person? What can we be doing to help these AI systems really understand our brand and parse that information correctly?
Thanks, Janet. So my first and most important piece of advice is be very explicit about who you are, who your brand is, and the things that you do. Recently, a client of Overqualified was having an issue where they were receiving leads asking for cooking oil, which is not something that they provided. And it turned out that the AI overview or the AI agents were saying that, yes, they did provide cooking oil. So real quick fix, just going in and saying company X does not provide cooking oil, cut off all of those unqualified leads. And so I think what's really important is to keep that in mind when you're going from your homepage to your product page, all over your website, that you have to spell out in, plain English or whatever language, exactly what you do, and also drawing boundaries on the things that you don't do. And a lot of marketers start to get really worried about that. Like, oh no, we're going to turn away an audience, but actually you're turning away the audience that aren't going to want you anyways. And you're going to get eyes from the people who actually need you.
So, Tamara, in that example you gave, where did you have them put that information that said, we don't sell cooking oil?
So on the product page for a vegetable oil that is not cooking oil, but used for other uses, like topically and things like that, we put at, it within the copy of that page does not supply cooking oil, and very explicitly on its own, aligned to itself. Um, and it worked. It worked within 24 hours. It was really
Wow.
interesting.
That's great. Well, that's great. Just the plain language really helped. Gerald, do you have anything that you want to add to this question?
Yeah, I think there's two things. I think there's two big mind shifts that are happening right now in the industry. So the first is around traffic, actually, just to go back on the poll that was just done. So brands are panicking about declining in traffic, but the real question today isn't, did I get a click? It's actually, is my brand present in the moment that actually matters? And I think that's the big thing that we need to do, which is why we're going back to brilliant basic metrics here of AI, share of voice, visibility, brand visibility. All of these different metrics become really important. Rather like, years ago when we had billboards on the side of a road and a motorway and gas stations, that's basically what is basically happening here, but just in a digital format. And I think, another big mind shift as well that we need to get more comfortable with in digital marketing is that we should stop focusing only on our .com. For years, SEO has taught brands the goal is to get website and people to their websites. But actually, LLMs don't work like that. They don't crawl the web and say, this website claims this particular thing, let's just recommend that one thing. It's actually making sure that that thing is also reinforced on other sources like publications, forums, reviews, relevant industry news websites, and community discussions become really, really important, primarily in today's digital world. But the good news is none of this is new. This is classic SEO best practices with an addition and extension. If you like, answers still need to be answered clearly, structured headlines, as you've heard from the case study there of oil as well. So all of those things really, really matter, and brands can succeed quite quickly, literally within 24 hours or more.
So to dovetail on what Gerald just mentioned about how a lot of this isn't necessarily new, but it's evolving for all of us, and we have to really think about things a little bit differently. I wanted to ask Sarah, how do you think a brand's approach to thought leadership in general needs to change around this age of AI? Like, what do we need to be doing differently? How do we need to be thinking about things in our brand differently when we market it?
Yeah, I think thought leadership internally, and I think there's a lot of education that is so important to do internally for all of your teams because, and for a long time, I think this has been the case where this is more than just an SEO, and I hate to call it even SEO, I call it, um, a lot of different things internally these days of organic search visibility. Like, do we even call ourselves SEO these days? And that's a big question internally of, we also do app store optimization on my team, and now GEO or AIO, and even just what to call it. But how do you educate internally for leadership and executives, as well as just everybody else on the general team? So we've been hosting a bunch of sessions internally, and I think that's a really important part. So if you have an agency, if you have an internal SEO team, getting that education, or even just these conferences in general, sharing the links internally, it's amazing that they're a free resource, and sharing the links that they live on after the conference. So these types of things I think are just extremely helpful to make sure you're educating internally. I'm more the merrier type of person. So just making sure that you're like, this session was a great session. Here's a great understanding of some of the things that are happening in the industry. But even just some of the concerns that we mentioned before of the poll of lack of citations, brand control, traffic site being down, clicks being down, quality of traffic, like Gerald was mentioning earlier, are huge concerns for leadership. So how do you make sure that you're taking that, but also quantifying it with your data and analytics team, and taking that and slicing it in the right way of, okay, but this is what's still converting. Here's what's not converting. And how do you kind of parse it out of the different types of traffic that you need to work on, as well as what's still working and getting better? Because while clicks are down, what is the traffic where clicks are up? Because that is really a big win, in my opinion.
Okay. Nikki, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So NP Digital was really born out of thought leadership. It's an essential part of who we are as a brand. And what we've learned is in this AI age, thought leadership can no longer be just informative, right? Because AI just regurgitates all of the information that's already existing. So we really have to think about moving from explaining what happened to interpreting why something matters. And so your job is no longer just, hey, this is what's going on, because that's widely known and AI is going to give everyone that information anyway. It's really to tell people, like, what does this mean for your audience and what are you supposed to do next? And so, there's a data framework that we use in our reporting called the what, the so what, the now what. And I think thought leadership has to take that same framework now. For example, at NP Digital, we curate this monthly industry roundup newsletter each month. All of us who work in the search space know that the amount of news that is happening now is insane, right? So we're looking at everything that's going on Search Engine Land, Search Engine Journal, LinkedIn, Adweek, all these different places. And we curate that into a report for our clients that says, this is why this update matters for you. And this is what we're thinking we should do next. And our clients love this roundup, right? Even though it's built off from something that is somewhat common knowledge, it's really that curation of adding the so what and the now what that gets people's attention. And then beyond that, we all know that generic insights are slowly dying, right? So, proprietary data and real case studies, like that's where you have to start these days if you want to be a true thought leader.
Yeah. And like you said, it's just a fire hose of stuff coming at folks right now. And so I love that you make it personal to your client and saying, here's how this affects you and how you can take advantage of it. That's great.
I think too, just to add to what Nikki was saying, is the way to get internal buy-in is, here's how this can help you do your job, and this is how you can quantify what you need to quantify when you're doing it. So that's another way that I try to help get internal buy-in of, like, hey, this is something that might help you with your end of year goals. So I think, just to Nikki's point though, there's like ways to do that internally to sweeten the pot, if you will.
Like that. Yeah, definitely need to sweeten the pot. So according to all accounts, brand mentions on platforms like Reddit, in particular, industry specific forums and niche publications are really important for AI discovery. What tips can you all share on how brands can get those mentions that they need to get into the very essential locations to get included in that AI discovery?
I can kick this one off. This is a really important topic because our data at NPD shows that tweaking your content, snippet style content, adding FAQs, updating your headings, like Gerald said, it really can very quickly help jumpstart your AI visibility. I echo Gerald's sentiment. Usually within 24 hours of making those content tweaks, it's like, oh, wow, we're in a bunch of new Google AI overviews and it's great. But our data shows that without these off-site mentions and links and conversations that are happening, that growth doesn't sustain. And that's especially true on ChatGPT. So getting these mentions is really important. And you've probably heard this from me in other forums before. I'm sure you've heard this, in a lot of different forums, but today, it really comes down to creating something unique, something proprietary, something that not everybody else is creating. And then you have to promote the hell out of that proprietary content. So, AI synthesizes patterns, right? They're like guessing what's going to come next. So if your content says what everyone else's content says, you're going to get lost in the shuffle. So that's why you have to create something newsworthy. And what that means is, is what you're thinking about creating something that you would happily bring to your PR and your comms team, and they would be like, this is great, we can bring this to our connections? And if not, then you might have to rethink your strategy. So start thinking about what types of original research you can create. It could be looking at your own internal data, right? At NPD, we have access to dozens and dozens of enterprise data, and we aggregate that in a platform called Funnel so that we can answer questions like, what is the average click-through rate for position 1 for clients in the consumer packaged goods or retail or finance space, right? That's data that not everybody else has. And that is something that you can go out and use to pitch the media and to get your content picked up. And I think you can pressure test this with yourself, right? This is what I do. Would I personally share this piece of information with my own LinkedIn network? Do I think it's a cool piece of information? And if it's like, no, because everyone else is talking about this and I have nothing new to add to the conversation, again, rethink that idea. And then, like I said, promoting your content is hypercritical, right? So, I talked earlier about the concept of search everywhere optimization. So you create a piece of content that could live on your website, but you could also create a YouTube video out of it. You could create a carousel to post on LinkedIn. So you really need to be taking that search everywhere optimization approach. Especially because we know that LLMs are pulling in, social content. Create great content, make sure it's something that hasn't been done a million times before, and then go and work with your PR and comms teams to promote it and get it out there.
And I'm going to jump on that really quickly. Nikki mentioned YouTube. YouTube is growing much more important, especially within the Google AI overviews and AI mode. And there are two recent studies, one from Ahrefs and one from Moz. The one from Moz was like a couple of weeks ago, that are saying that nearly a quarter of all of the Google AI overview or AI mode answers are coming from inside YouTube videos. So having those citations, the timelines within your YouTube videos, and really making that a place where you're going into depth as well is becoming more important.
We are expecting that AI agents are eventually going to be the primary browsers of our websites. So how are you preparing for this huge change? It's a big shift. Who would like to jump in and share how you all are preparing for this shift?
I can jump in here as well. At NPD, we've started what we're calling an agentic AI task force. And it's really comprised of like a bunch of different teams across the organization. And it's been important to have all those different teams because this is a very new, very uncharted territory. And we're learning that each team has something slightly different to contribute to figuring out what this means, for our future strategies. So we've got earned media, right? We're the team that's driving all these offsite mentions I've been talking about, but we're also the team that is helping to align our clients' messaging across various places, feeds, which paid media typically handles, right? But there's a lot of synergy between paid and earned that is becoming more and more essential with this AI landscape. And earned is really that trust building backbone. And then we've got our technical SEO team and our engineers, because they're in the, data feed, structured markup, site architecture, accessibility realm, and they're bringing that to the table. We've got our paid team, right? They live in feeds anyway, and then they're really the ones that are helping to test and scale across these emerging, agent integrated ad formats. And then, of course, one of the most important things is data and analytics, because how some of this stuff is working today, all these ads that have been launched in ChatGPT, you'd think they've worked out the measurement kinks before they launched these services, but they really haven't. And so there's a lot of questions that are going unanswered with how do you measure the success of all these agentic-led experiences? And so, it's really a collaborative effort between all these teams. And we just get together every 2 weeks and talk about what we're testing with clients, what news we're seeing, and we start to formulate, use case and test and drive it all forward together.
Yeah, it really does affect so many members of the organization. It's not just going to be one person, the SEO person even, who was, touching this. It's going to be everyone across the board. So Tamara, how do we think about that from a content perspective?
Yeah, for content, there's a lot of chatter about how to present your content to the bots. Recently, there was this markup versus HTML debate that kind of blew up and then thankfully subsided, because really, ultimately, it's going to be humans that are reading the output, whether it's on your site or through the agents. And those LLMs don't know how to put sentences together without the models that are on the content. So, really, what's good for SEO is good for agents, and what is good for those human users that come afterwards. So, my advice there is go back to the basics. Write clear, concise copy with hierarchy and structure for the way that humans read, and then also have strong branding that expresses the company's personality and a story that differentiates you in the marketplace.
That's great. In the early days of SEO, we used to have to be very exact with our keywords. We used to have to say the very specific keyword. And then things evolved and we were able to use, we have more semantic indexing, and we were able to use synonyms, which was fantastic. And so, but to your point, like I think really writing that content, it's going to be important to educate. We use that semantic SEO effort to help educate Google and the like, to say, hey, this word and this word are the same. It sounds like it's going to be very similar for AI.
I just want to add like another thing here too, just to help with internal teams where I know we're talking about AI agents for the web, but since a lot of teams do have like Copilot or ChatGPT, a good way to get your teams acquainted with AI agents in general and getting that workflow of the agents working together is to help them and your teams create their own AI agents internally to help them understand the nuances of all of it. So that's something that I've been doing to help with that. And I think that will then help understand the website element of it. So I know that's a little bit off topic, but I think that's a helpful tip of just helping to educate internally as well.
Probably helps comfort level too, and being
Yeah.
able to be, acquainted with it. So we've discussed a lot of information today. And what is everyone, I'd like to open this up to the entire panel. What is one key tip or takeaway that you want everyone to have today and get out of this discussion? If they leave with nothing else today, what do you want them to go out and do immediately?
My soapbox is on clarity. Clarity is so important, and I'm always going to be standing on the soapbox, I think. But you can no longer get by with vague descriptions of your company, your product, and even drawing those boundaries of what you will and won't do.
Love that. I would say, from my perspective, winning brands right now are doing three things very consistently. So if you can take away anything, it's these three things. Proactively build your brand to have strong trust signals. Trust is everything right now. If all of your old customers are talking about you very poorly and Reddit and other reviews, like that's gonna hurt you. You got to take care of that. Winning brands today are also taking this search everywhere approach that's kind of come up in this conversation, right? Search doesn't only happen on Google. It's also not only on AI. So be thinking about your brand and how you can show up with a consistent message across all the platforms where your audiences spend time. And then lastly, it's that type of content and thought leadership you're putting out. Stop wasting money putting out a million things that have been done a million times. Like, yes, programmatic content still works. It's going to help your SEO. But if you really want to stand out, you've got to put something out that is more proprietary and more unique. And again, something that your PR and comms team are like, yes, we can work with this. We can go pitch this.
I love that. And I am going to say own your brand narrative. So important. And I am also going to say just organic search is everybody's responsibility at the company. And just that collaboration internally is so important and clutch and key. So just making sure you make friends throughout the company.
And Gerald, do you have a lot of friends in the company?
No, I think Sarah, I think you're spot on. Everyone actually, to be quite honest with you, I think I'm only just repeating things. I think It's published knowledge, not just marketing pages and not just pages on our own .coms. It's getting more comfortable with speaking about subreddits. It's also getting quite uncomfortable speaking to some brands, for instance, that are maybe in high-end fashion that don't actually see themselves being associated with Reddit and YouTube a lot, but actually they need to actually publish what their brand is, what products they have on those places, because the reality is they are search engines in their own right. YouTube is to watch, Amazon is to buy, Google is to go. And you get more comfortable with actually consumers have much more intents than what they ever had, purely because they actually have a lot more choices. So that would be my top tip.
Excellent. Well, thank you all. This has been just a really great discussion. We're going to transition now into our questions. I want to our Q&A period. If you have a question, be sure and put it into the Q&A area, into the chat. You can enter them there and they'll come through to us and we can share them with the panel. So we have about 10 minutes. We can share some answers to questions. So I'm going to throw this out to the panel. First question that came in, and this is one that I am really curious about because I feel like it's changing all the time. How should companies measure visibility? We talk a lot about how we're going to optimize for it, but how do we know we were successful? So how are you all finding that companies can measure visibility when AI answers are replacing the clicks?
I would say share of search or competitive share of voice. This isn't a new metric, right? You could get this in Semrush or Ahrefs for a long time now, but I think it's important to remember that you might be growing or you might be declining, but how does that compare to your direct competitors? And how can you make a plan to start to capture some of their market share? So this is true across both traditional SEO. Again, like I said, you pull that from a Semrush, or your average AI visibility tool is going to give you that across the AI surfaces that matter to you too. So I think just always keeping that competitive lens is essential.
Just to jump in on that, actually, Nikki, I think there's three metrics that should be standard across all of your tool sets, and it's just to better understand essentially the visibility landscape. I think the first one is AI share of voice, like know what it is, and what we mean by that is aggregated. So looking at a combination of your performance on Google AI overviews, Google AI mode, that's your Google strategy, combining that with LLMs, Claude, for instance, and then also combining that with hybrid LLMs that actually use web search in them, like ChatGPT. So making sure that we have an understanding of what our AI share of voice is on each of those sources individually, but also collectively. And then secondly, of three metrics, I think another one really important is brand visibility. It's a very simple metric, but just are you present or not? From 0 to 100, just working out where you are. And then what share of voice does is builds on that, because it's actually helping you to understand, are you high up in those results? In other words, are more consumers going to see you? And then finally, because it's a really powerful metric, because it's not looking at reporting per se, it's source visibility. It's actually starting to get into the actions of the sources that AI is using. Are we present in those? And if we're not, how can we get in there? So do we connect with other friends, as we've talked about on today, PR teams, social media teams, all of those different stakeholders that can help? But if you are on those sources, are you favorable or less favorable than your competitors? And that is something where you can start to update your content away from your own .com.
Great. Next question we have coming in is, this is sort of a technical one. So if someone can explain from the panel what this is and then answer where you think we are. Jonathan asked, where do we stand? So if someone could share with us like what LLMs.txt is, what it does, and then for those who might not know, and then do you feel like it's a requirement today to get into an LLM, or to get into one of the AI tools? Who would like to take that one?
I can hop in here. Recent studies I've seen have shown that having an LLMs.txt on your website has not amounted in, at the moment, not amounted in a greater amount of visibility and citations. I think maybe the websites that have an LLMs.txt had a very, very, very small advantage over those that didn't. But that could also be correlation, right? Because they might just be investing in more SEO in general. So if you're not familiar with what the file is, it's kind of like a robots.txt. It's a file you host on your website that you can put kind of whatever you want in there, and it speaks directly to LLMs. You can tell them, who your brand is, what you do, what you don't do. You don't sell cooking oil, right? In Tamara's case. And, I would say keep this as a low effort thing, right? It's low impact right now. You can launch one, you can test it. They are getting crawled in some cases. In some cases, they're not, based on our client data. So it's not going to hurt to have it, but don't go spend a zillion hours trying to perfect and launch an LLMs.txt. Keep it very high effort or very low effort for now.
Okay, we have a question from Tyson. I've read a lot about owned media versus earned media and how earned media is going to be more effective for AI discovery in the future. What are effective ways to find sources that are not a waste of time? This is a tough one because there's a lot of stuff out there, right? Where do you focus your time? And then how would you go about approaching those sources for mentions? I mean, this kind of takes me back to the link building days. And like, how do you get link sources and inbound links? Similar idea, but we want good sources. So how would you recommend finding the right sources and then communicating with them to try and get that inclusion from an earned media perspective?
I think for now, there are affiliate networks that do show up as, in citation worlds. I don't know if that's here to stay, but right now it does show up, top 10 best whatever, or lists that happen to be affiliates. So I do think it's a matter of industry, taking a look at what your industry is, and what is out there, and as far as citations go, and what topics there are. But I don't know if it's a practice that is here to stay. So I think it's one of those things to watch and seeing how different tools treat it. But I don't know if it's something that is ultimately, something that is a long-term solution. We'll see what happens here. I am interested myself in seeing if it's a long-term solution.
Mike and Greg have pretty similar related questions, so I'm going to kind of combine them here. Mike was asking specifically about small businesses. Greg was asking about having a limited marketing budget, which many small businesses also have a limited marketing budget. Mike had asked about if you don't have, if you're a small business, you have lack of infrastructure that the big brands might have, you probably don't have the budget. How would you prioritize your approach on this? Now, Mike was specifically asking about how do you optimize your website for GEO, but Greg was saying, should I prioritize a website redesign or invest in GEO? And they're probably kind of similar. You're doing a lot of that same stuff at the same time. How would you all tell folks with a limited budget to prioritize their time with their website and trying to get into GEO?
Well, I don't think a full website redesign is necessarily always the answer. It can often really kind of break your SEO sometimes, especially if you have redirects and all of that. But in terms of content, go back to those very basics for SEO. If you're looking at your website, make sure that you are interlinking between pages, making sure that your pages are very clear on what they're covering, that you are answering the questions that your customers ask. And I think that this may be an unpopular opinion, but I think that working directly for GEO is not the way to go. You really have to work for the search engines that the GEO tools are going to be looking at. So, everybody wants to find the new best thing, but really, like, going back to basics, I think, is what's going to work best for a limited marketing budget.
I totally agree. I think that doing what is best for the user and for your website, making sure that you have clear structure to your pages, that each page has its own identity, that it should exist. There's no competing pages, that it's very clear structure. Easy crawlability, I think, is very key for LLMs and for search engines. So just, I think a lot of 101, and just making sure that you have a clear site structure. Any old legacy cleanup that you can do, the better. Making sure that the best practices are always there, and response codes. So I think just, what the cleanup can be, and just following best practices is really key. And then also just, going back to some of what we've talked about earlier of, what topics as your company, I think it's moving away from keywords, going to topics of what your brand narrative is, of like looking at it from more of a topic perspective versus just a keyword perspective, and talking about your brand that way and your company that way.
Excellent. Well, I think we're at time now, so I'm going to go ahead and say thank you to all of you for joining us. Thank you to our awesome panelists today. Y'all were fantastic. Thanks for all of this great information. If you could please take a moment to rate this session as well. If you click on the red button in the Dig Deeper tab, you can get to the next session. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I hope you gained some really great insights from our panel, and have a great day.
Thank you.